This is Matt.
This is Seth.
Welcome to
The Unbroken Net.
This is a podcast where we're going to share with you some ridiculous ideas.
Yeah, and who cares if you believe what we believe? Just think for yourself.
That's all we're asking. Hey there, and welcome to this edition of The Unbroken Net. Today we're going to be talking about 1 John chapter 2, verse 28 through chapter 3, verse 3. So, Seth, could you read that for us?
Sure, I can do that. And now, little children, abide in him, so that when he appears, we may have confidence and not shrink from him in shame at his coming. If you know that he is righteous, you may be sure that everyone who practices righteousness has been born of him. See what kind of love the Father has given to us, that we should be called children of God, and so we are. The reason why the world does not know us is that it did not know him. Beloved, we are God's children now, and what we will be has not yet appeared. But we know that when he appears, we shall be like him, because we shall see him as he is. And everyone who thus hopes in him purifies himself as he is pure.
That's good stuff.
Yeah, sure is. So, starting back in verse 28, he mentions that to abide in him. So, what exactly does that mean, to abide in him? He's asking, little children abide in him.
Yeah, I think this is where we talk about intimate walk with God or a relationship with God, abiding in, actually taking part within the very character and nature of God and on a personal basis.
Mm-hmm. So, and he's also, do you think, later on he says we are God's children, but he's also called people in this letter like children, my children.
Yeah.
What do you think he's saying when he's saying that, and now little children abide in him?
Well, I would say that this is referring to a young person, little children. It's John's students, John's children, his little ones.
Right. So kind of how he was addressing the letter earlier in the letter.
How he addressed his audience.
Yeah. So then he goes on and he says, when abide in him, so that when he appears, we may have confidence and not shrink from him in shame at his coming. So what does that mean at his coming, or when he appears?
Yeah. So Jesus had this statement in Matthew 28, right? Maybe it wasn't Jesus. It was said about Jesus that in the same way he left, he will return.
Right.
And there's this idea of a bodily return of Jesus. I personally, I don't know about that. Like, I have a hard time wrapping my mind around that. I kind of wonder if it's more of like a Christ consciousness that spreads to all people.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
Well, I mean, I like to think of it this way. Like, maybe we won't actually see Jesus come back or appear until that we start seeing Jesus in everyone around us.
Yeah, that's a good point. And that's like that Christ consciousness idea where we're going to see all people starting to really relate to God and view each other as the sons and daughters of God.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so then, I guess that would be what it means for him to appear. Now, he also says we should have confidence and not shrink from him in shame. So why would we be shrinking in shame?
Well, when you wrong your brother, aren't you shameful over what you've done? And if we're looking for the return of Christ in every person around us, um, we we want to have confidence, right? We want to abide in Him. We want to walk with God, living in a right manner, so that we will have no reason to have shame,
Hmm.
whether it's a bodily return of Jesus or if it's just that awareness that falls upon all people.
And I think there's also the point where if you're confident um, in his coming, it's the confidence of knowing who he is
Yeah.
and knowing that he is true love,
Mm-hmm.
and that if we are even shrinking from him in shame, that means that we don't really know who
What?
he is.
Yeah, or what true love is.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's said in the beginning of this letter that God is light and in Him there is no darkness at all. And oftentimes we attribute these dark qualities to God as far as His judgment and wrath and
Hmm.
forever condemnation and torment and hell. Um, I just don't see that fitting within the character and nature of God, especially when there's no darkness in Him. We do see darkness in the devil, right? In
Hmm.
Satan, in the fallen one, in the accuser of the brethren. That's where we see the darkness.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think that darkness is he's trying to spread that to us by telling us that trying to pull us away from what our true nature is, which is to be the likeness of God
Yeah.
Himself,
That's what I think.
and stamping out that light. But
Mm-hmm.
uh, I think we've already covered that in the last episode. Um, so he also talks more about righteousness here. He says, "If you know that He is righteous, you may be sure that everyone who practices righteousness has been born of Him." So everyone practicing righteousness. What does that speak to you, or how does that speak to
Well,
you?
it reminds me of a verse that's coming up in a few episodes here that says, "This is how you know that you know God, that you love one another." And uh, I ask myself the question, who doesn't know God then? Because we all have love for someone. We all have love for our family members and our children and our friends and
Hmm.
sometimes even our neighbors. And so the
Yeah,
same idea.
it
Everyone who
seems
practices righteousness has been born of Him.
it seems like we don't always attribute that to being to God, like that love that we feel towards our family, or
Mm-hmm.
it's not always. We don't attribute what we almost see it as a God as a someone who's offended if you sin against him, or
Mm-hmm.
but I don't see him like that. I think love is that he's there to protect us, and he'll do whatever he can
Mm-hmm.
to save us, which he did. He did. He went to the cross. He let us beat him and crucify him. But um, so that actually that ends the chapter 2. Let's moving on to chapter 3. John starts talking about he talks about the what kind of love the Father has given to us, and he says that it's the kind of love that he is to be called the children of God.
Mm.
What does that mean to be children of God?
Yeah, and this is a different word than the other children, but it's more of a student or a disciple or someone who's really learning how to live from God, and it's really cool because just like you learn from your father and you learn to be like your father, the Father has shown us that kind of love that He's teaching us, and we're able to learn from Him.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Hmm. It also makes me think of when you say it's this word children is almost like a young learner. in a
Yeah,
sense. It makes me think of like the disciples. That's exactly what disciples are. They're just learners,
that's it.
essentially.
Yeah,
So we could call them children of God, disciples, the children
yeah,
of God.
yeah.
Hmm. So what do you? So you're saying that the kind of love the Father has is that we should be taught by Him, and in His ways and in His likeness.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is an amazing thing. And I don't know about you, but my relationship is very intimate with the Father. And I feel like I hear from God every time I cry out. And I don't mean cry out as in anguish, but I mean like every time I speak and I ask God a question, I feel like I get an answer.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's an amazing thing that the creator of all of this is willing to talk to me and willing to guide me and direct me. And I think everyone hears differently from God. Like, not everyone hears a voice, but you get a feeling or a gut reaction or an emotion or something. You know, there's some sort of correspondence there.
Mm-hmm.
And I think when we really think about that, it's a pretty amazing thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and also kind of relate it in two different sense, a different sense that the teaching is coming from a father who. Why does a father teach his son or his daughter anything? It's for them to flourish and to thrive.
Yeah.
Like it's not so much like if it's if you're at work and you have a boss and they're teaching you how to do a certain skill, it's not so much that you'll flourish. I mean, of course, maybe they want you to flourish, and a good boss, that's a loving boss, will be one that would teach to flourish, to help the employee flourish. But they're really doing that to help the company flourish, to help themselves
Yeah.
do well.
And like I feel like a father really wants not only for his children to flourish, but for his children to become a better person than he was.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like a dad would want his children to excel beyond where he has come to. There'd be no greater joy than to see your children walk not only in the same manner as you, but in an even more holy and righteous manner than you. It just makes me think about Jesus saying, you will do these things you've seen me do, and not only these things, but you'll do greater things. And I don't know that the Father has an expectation for us to do greater than him,
Mm-hmm.
but certainly there's this I don't want to say expectation, but there's this desire for us to be like him.
Right. And it kind of segues into the next section where he says, "What we will be has not yet appeared."
Mm-hmm.
So have we just not fully learned what we are to be? And that,
Yeah, I think so, because while there's a relationship with God here, it's a hard relationship to grasp sometimes. There are so many distractions, and
mm-hmm.
and maybe that's a good evidence for a physical return of God. I don't know.
Right.
But
So you think this appearance is the same thing as he's talking about in the last chapter? It's the same appearance?
yeah,
I
I
mean,
think so.
well, I mean, I didn't really fully talk that out. That he says what we will be has not yet appeared, but we know that when he appears, we shall be like him. So this appearance, that's what I'm talking about. That you think that's the same thing he's talking about? And
It would seem so.
mm-hmm.
It would seem so.
So what is?
But it could also be when he appears to you, or when you finally see him.
Mm-hmm.
You know, then the change starts to occur.
I was kind of I was kind of thinking that as well. It's like once he's appeared to you, that's when you can see who you are.
Yeah.
And I wonder if that appearance is just knowing the true, what God really thinks, or what God's character really is, and that and just what we've seen in Christ. But I don't know, something to think about there.
Yeah.
He
Hey,
do-
Go
oh,
ahead.
yeah,
I was going to say at the end of chapter or verse 1, there's this phrase: the reason why the world does not know us is that it did not know him. What do you think about that, Seth?
I think, well, what I think about that is that I think it's, I think I mentioned it before, but I think it means that we didn't really know the character of God, and we really thought that he was somebody who's easily offended, that just wants us to keep his rules and stay in line. But then he flipped it on its head when he came down as Jesus Christ, and then suffered under us, essentially, and then died on that cross, and just changed. That is the transformation and the renewing of our minds.
Yeah.
It's just that knowing that God is a God who'll go any lengths to just let us know that we're not under this dictatorship or this rule where if you don't do exactly right, you're going to get destroyed.
Which is kind of the way the world works, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so when we start treating people differently, when we start loving on people and accepting them just the way they are, the world doesn't know how to handle that. That is the civilization that's living according to the flesh, according to the desires of the flesh, the pride of life and whatnot. Yeah, they don't understand that because they haven't tasted the goodness of God yet, perhaps. Or if they have, they haven't comprehended it.
Right. And what does that mean when he says that we shall be like him once he appears and we become like him?
Yeah.
It's becoming like the one who does do those things, that loves one another, that loves, that puts people first and sacrifices themselves for other people. That's what makes us like him. At least that's what I believe makes us like him.
I think that sounds accurate, at least on the right path.
Yeah, hopefully. Actually, there's last part of this where he says, we shall see him as he is. So why is he reiterating that? Because he already said that he has not appeared, but then we know that when he appears, we shall be like him, because we shall see him as he is.
So it is one thing for us who weren't living here 2,000 years ago and able to walk with the Word of God that took on flesh, to see that way in which he walked, and truly, even the way his eyes fixed their gaze upon the people that were around him. We haven't seen that ourselves. John did.
Yeah.
John can testify to that. In fact, in the beginning, that which we have seen and heard and felt, we testify to you, remember? And he's talking to a bunch of people who did not see Jesus. They did not see the way he loved and the way he lived and the way he put other people first.
But I think there was more people that didn't see Jesus when he was on this earth walking with us, that saw him with their eyes, but they didn't truly see who he was.
Yeah, and because they weren't maybe willing to accept how humble and simple he was. They were viewing God differently. They were expecting something different from God. a mighty warrior or a strong man or someone who was going to forcefully right all the wrongs that had been done. And that's not the way Jesus, that's not the way he walked.
Yeah, he turned our perceptions on their heads.
Yeah.
It's interesting that there was at least the 12 or 11, I guess, discounting Judas, that actually saw. It seems that they saw Jesus for who he really was.
Yeah, and I don't even know that Judas didn't see Jesus for who he was. You know, in the same way that Peter knew who Jesus was, but he still denied him 3 times. Yeah. Judas probably did see Jesus for who he was, and that's why he was willing to follow, and he just succumbed to a temptation. But it's almost like that temptation was part of the plan. I don't know. But
well, it had to be, didn't it? It seems like it would have to be part of.
I mean, Jesus said he was going to be slaughtered. He was going to be crucified.
Yeah.
He knew that.
He even rebuked Peter when he said that Peter was going to try to stop that from happening.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is fascinating. But we're not going to talk about that today because we're not in that passage.
No, we're not.
So there was actually one disciple who actually did make it to the cross, or who didn't actually deny Jesus and didn't flee.
Yeah, he followed the whole time, and
who was that?
It's
John.
It's John, the one that we're reading his letter.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing.
Yeah,
maybe that's why he thinks he's loved the most.
Yeah.
Boy, we're actually running a lot out of time, and we have a few more questions here. We haven't even gotten to verse 3.
Yeah.
So let's just get this last section here. So he also mentions. Let me just read verse 3. And everyone who thus hopes in him purifies himself as he is pure. So that phrase, hopes in him. How does that resonate?
Well, it makes me think about my relationship with God and how I want it so much to be true. I was talking with someone the other day about the still small voice, and they said, how do you know it's just not yourself? You know?
Mm-hmm.
And I had to think about that, you know. Is it really just myself? But I don't think it is, you know. I asked, is it just me, God? And he said, no. You know, that was the answer I got. It just came just like that. No, it's not just you.
So that's what it means to you, that to hope in him, that voice that you're hearing is.
Yeah, there's so many things that want to take us away from that simplicity. You talk with people and particularly people who've studied theology and they want to make it so complicated, you know, especially those who've been religious. And just like Israel did with their religion, there had to be the sacrifice. And then we come into some of the teachings today, and it's, you got to do this, and you got to do this, and you got to do this, because if you do this, you will not please God. And that just doesn't fit with my experience.
Mm-hmm.
Not that God is pleased when I sin, but God doesn't leave me when I fall short. God meets me right where I'm at, and God has never left me. There was a time I remember preaching, and I said right in the middle of the sermon, I just don't hear him like I used to.
Mm.
And what I think is I had gotten so busy in my life trying to figure out what God is like that I forgot who he is. Yeah, I forgot how simple he is, that he's with me always. I was spending so much time trying to figure out all of this theology and all of this doctrine, all these things that the church has built its foundation upon. And I forgot the simplicity of Christ within.
Yeah, maybe you were leaning on your own understanding.
Yeah.
And you weren't just listening to what he had to say to you.
Yeah. Yeah. I was so caught up in all the other people's opinions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think what it kind of says to me when he says hopes in him, it kind of means that the hope in that the sacrificial love that Jesus had, that God had for us, that does win out the day. I mean, we do live in every age has its trials and issues and stuff we have to go through, and I mean, a lot of it we learn from it and we grow from it, but there has to be a hope that will end, and that the triumphant return would be just an end to all that evil. And I think that a lot of that culminates with people starting to love one another. And that's the hope, is the hope that we get to that point where everybody is acting like Jesus. Everybody is following that Christ that is inside of them.
Yeah. Yep. I just think of the angel's announcement at the birth of Jesus, goodwill and peace to men with whom God is well pleased. Goodwill to all humanity and peace. Like, I feel like that's the hope I have, is when that appearance of Christ comes to every heart and every soul, there will be this time of peace and equality and oneness that I think we're all longing for. A time when every person will be valued.
Right. That is the hope.
That's my hope.
And that the hope that we can see, that all of us see Jesus, see Christ in one another.
Yeah.
Wow, we didn't even get to the last. He talks about
purifying
this hope.
himself as he is pure.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, and that's how we get that. That's how we get the fulfillment to that hope, right? Is we purify ourselves and we show that love. And in the same way that Jesus demonstrated that love, we do our best to demonstrate that love, and it becomes contagious. People see that and they want to emulate. They want to be like those heroes who do the right thing no matter what. We purify ourselves even as he is pure.
Right.
And that's how we bring this thing about, I guess.
And really, we get that purification from that hope, from that love that we show, following those teachings, knowing God is the God who loves us that much, that there's no lengths he wouldn't go to.
Yeah.
And we find salvation in that.
I do.
Yeah. In Christ. Well, I would ask you if there's any more thoughts you have, but we don't have time for that.
We don't have time for that.
But we do appreciate you listening today, and we hope that you got something out of it. And if you did, just give us a like on this episode, and if you really liked it, just subscribe so you can hear more of us two blabbing it back and forth.
Yeah.
All right, you take care now.
Bye now.